Okay, the first question we'd like to ask you is, how did you first find out or begin working at the AMC?
Alright, so how did I first begin working with AMC? It goes back 2 years now, about actually this month, 2 years ago. I started as a teen trail crew volunteer leader. So I would take high school kids out and we would go into the backcountry. We would spend 4 nights spending the night out in tents. And in the meantime, we would build and work on trails. I discovered that position by doing a Leave No Trace Master Educator course. So what that is we learn all the different ways to keep the forest looking like it is and keeping it really nice. So how do you dispose of waste? Where do you walk when you're on a trail? How do you camp? Where to camp? How to be respectful to the wildlife and other people. And so I actually started that program out of where I work now, which is called Camp Dodge, which is right up in the middle of the White Mountain National Forest, and just fell in love with the area. I'm actually from West Virginia right now, and before that, Maryland, and before that, I grew up 10 years in Tennessee. So when I was your age, I was actually in Tennessee, and had no clue that New Hampshire even existed, to be honest, until I moved up and did that Leave No Trace course. So that really opened my eyes to the Appalachian Mountain Club and everything that the AMC had to offer.
What's your favorite part of your volunteering for the AMC?
All right. Yeah, so I don't technically volunteer. I am actually a paid staff, but I can speak for our volunteers in the fact that when they come out and they volunteer for us, what they're doing is getting a couple different things. They're learning a lot of new things. They're experiencing a lot of new activities, and they're gaining a respect for the work that's done. So the volunteers tend to draw a lot from their experiences. I mean, we teach them primitive tool use. So it's anything from using a shovel to learning how to cut a tree down with a crosscut saw. And along with that, we talk about kind of forestry ethics on how many trees should we cut in an area and what type of trees we should cut for what type of uses. So it's a little bit of forestry, and they also get volunteer hours, which is great. I mean, people, especially in high school, when you guys get there, you'll have to probably do like 20 or 200 hours of volunteer service work. So they're also getting that experience too. So it's really neat.
Okay. How many years have you studied trails?
All right, yeah, studying trails. So my nature, actually, before I started doing trail work, I was very opposed to trails. I'm not a long-distance hiker. I like to hike and I like to be in the woods, but I actually prefer being out there in the middle of the woods without the trail. And that was my job before this. I was worked for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, blazing the boundary. So I was actually about a quarter mile off of the Appalachian Trail, all up and down from Maine all the way to Virginia, off trail. And so it was very different. Coming into the trail work, that was 2 years ago this month, and it's great. I mean, it's different than being off trail, but yeah, I mean, it was 2 years ago now that I was really learned that trail work is a thing. I had no clue that people built stairs in the woods. I actually thought when I came to a staircase in the woods, like, wow, how did they find this set of stairs in the middle of the woods here? This is crazy. And come to find out, that was probably thousands of hours of people spending their time picking up rocks, carrying them from one spot to the next, or rolling them with these giant metal bars. They look like huge crowbars. They're called rock bars. And we'll roll rocks to these spots. So it was 2 years ago this month where I got all my training and all my know-how of what trails are. And since then, I've been pretty much living and breathing trail work. So there's a bit of a learning curve there, but yeah, I had no clue trails even had work on them. So the day that I learned about trails, Yeah, I mean, like the day that I learned the amount of work that went into it would have been that first week of training. I came up early, but it was May 25th, Memorial Day weekend is when we start rocking and rolling at Camp Dodge. So it was that first day we kind of do our orientation. Who are you? What are you here for? What type of job are you doing here? And then what the AMC does with our volunteer trail leaders, they give us an axe. And so they say, all right, this is your axe, this is your tool. Now, here's your chance to make it yours. Go and put it on a handle. So pretty much they give you an axe head, and they say, go put it on a handle. And what you would think of putting a piece of metal onto a piece of, like a stick to use for chopping stuff down, like chopping wood, would be easy. It took me a week to do. To get my axe head on that axe handle just right, and that was the beginning of trail work for me. That from then on, I was in love with it, and so, yeah.
Are there any specific places that you like to put trails?
Actually, there are some places I wish there were trails. How about that? I don't necessarily do the trail putting myself. I don't necessarily designate the spot for a trail. That's, especially in the White Mountains, that's done by the Forest Service. And they have a whole team of people who come out. They have archaeologists who come out. They have naturalists come out. They have erosion specialists come out. They have tons of people to go and look and pick the very special spot that, like what we discussed earlier, is going to not only give people the experience that they're looking for by drawing them to a location, but also protecting very delicate locations, very delicate spaces, like say this shoreline, by keeping people away from them. So my ideal spot for a trail would be, there's this amazing swimming hole out by us, and it's just got, like we have here, woven trails. The ground, there's no plants, there's no vegetation, because people walk wherever they want. There's no designated trail, and so that if I could build a trail, that's where I would build it. It's my number one most favorite swimming hole in the White Mountains, and it just doesn't have trails because it's right next to the road, so people just walk right off the road and just go and trample all the woods to get there. So this is actually amazing that you guys have this resource here, and that they've taken advantage of it and actually put trails here to keep people from just trampling in, because they will come and look at the coast. They are going to come here and look at the shoreline. So, yeah.
What are you going to do to try to help erosion on trails?
Right, so we discussed this. So what I do personally to help erosion on trails is that I build trail features. Water bars is one. That's where we put either a big log or rocks at about a 45-degree angle to the trail to run water off of the trail. We do things called check steps, which we actually create, like you saw in Hawaii, like a bunch of stairs. And what that does is the water hits that stair and it levels out and it flattens out and it slows down. And then it pours off the side and it kind of goes again and levels out and flattens out, and it slows the water down. So what it is acting as a stepping surface for us to go up in elevation, as well as checks the speed of the water. So there's a couple different things there. And then lastly, the main thing we do, and this is in really wet areas, we build bridges. We call them bog bridges, but what you do, you take two big logs, about 3 feet long, and you lay on top of those on either end, kind of like a log house. You would take two big fat logs like this and this, and then you would take other logs and you'd go lengthwise on them for you to walk on, and you'd clean those up really nice. And so they're just little tiny bridges about, a foot off the ground or so. And what that does is making the trail high, dry, durable, and very visible. Those 4 criteria that we really like our trails to be. So ideally, we would build all our trails as bog bridges or as bridges, boardwalks, because that's the most obvious thing, or like a path like this where they've dropped mulch or maybe gravel. So those are all ways that you can kind of stop erosion from happening, but people really like that primitive experience. When they're in the woods, they want to feel like they're in the woods. So if you were walking on a boardwalk for 5 miles throughout the woods, you'd be like, oh, I'm kind of like right next to the beach, like right downtown, kind of, like a boardwalk kind of represents. So what we try to do is try to keep it as primitive as possible. That's why we use those water bars, those check steps, and lastly, what we'll do is those bog bridges. I guess one thing I didn't mention are stepping stones. You guys all probably have these in your garden as well, or in your front yard. So we'll also just put big rocks in the mud where we expect people to be able to step. So we put them about a foot apart or so. But what that does is allows the water to still flow. It keeps, and same with the bog bridges, allows the water to continue its normal process of like going downhill, but it also gets you up and out of it to help stop that erosion process, stop your feet breaking up the soil.
How is trail erosion caused?
All right, so we have a couple different factors that cause trail erosion. Environmental factors, we have physical factors, and then, people. So the environmental stuff, that would be your freeze-thaw, right? We talked about how when the ground freezes and the water in the ground freezes, it expands and it brings with it a bunch of dirt. So it loosens that dirt. Another thing that happens when we walk through, we scuff the ground up, so we kind of break it up, and that kind of creates loose dirt that can be washed away when a heavy rain comes. Also, the other things we do, we compact the dirt. So that's another thing that reduces the amount of vegetation that there is on the trail or around the trail, which without the roots can't hold the ground together. So again, it washes away. So there's a couple different things that cause erosion, mainly in the White Mountains, and I imagine here as well. The main thing is probably water. Rain, hurricanes, tides, waves, I mean, you name it. And on the trail we have creeks, we have flowing water, we have elevation gain and loss, which water likes to move really quick on. So really water is our number one culprit of trail erosion, and people are our number 2 culprit, like the misuse of the trail by people.
Okay, so what are some things that you think our sign on trail erosion should highlight?
Right. So probably the main thing, the number one thing that your sign on trail erosion should include is to stay on trail. And to channel people's energy to be on that trail, we have to, as the trail maintainers, have to do a lot. We have to blaze the trails well. We have to make the trail a friendly, walkable surface. So what we're doing there, we're making it high, dry, durable, and visible. I mean, it all goes back to those 4 criteria. If we can build a trail that is high, dry, durable, and visible, build it and they will come. So maybe you'd want to put on there, trail erosion is caused by water, by freeze-thaw, by people, so like it's very important for us to do our part and stay on trail, and it's very important for the trail maintainers to do their part. So we could maybe highlight on that sign, what blazes are. Maybe a picture of a blaze on a tree. Something that says, like, these are how you identify the trail. Like, this is how you follow the trail. You could have a picture of something like this, where the trails are woven, and maybe discuss how staying on the trail is important to minimize the ground from being compacted and to allow vegetation to grow. Let's think what else might want to be on that sign. Definitely, we just need to educate. That's probably the main thing. People don't have malicious intent to tear up the woods. People want to do the right thing, right? So if we make it very doable, like feasible for them to do the right thing, they will. I imagine that the fact that this mulch is here, people are going to walk here. They're not going to want to go down in the mud there, where they're going to start breaking up the mud and helping it wash away. So just educating people on what the trail looks like and what is not the trail. And that actually goes back to what I originally discovered the AMC through, which was Leave No Trace. And they might be somebody who you guys might want to talk to or look this up. LeaveNoTrace.org or LNT.org. I don't know which one it is. But Leave No Trace is very amazing. I mean, it started back in the 70s or 80s, and they've been advocating for people to for people to do the right thing to help protect the forest for years and years and years. And so they would also probably have some really great resources on bringing awareness to what is the proper trail and, how to identify the trail. So also maybe, I don't know if this is something that you would have on right here, but maybe at the very beginning of your trail, if there's a sign, that says such and such trail this way, point whatever miles, so that people know that, oh, this is where the trail starts. Or maybe even just like what we got was a little map of the area and has that trail highlighted on it. Oftentimes areas like this actually have different color blazes for different trails. So when you go down this trail, it's on yellow, and then all of a sudden you see a blue one, you're like, oh wait, I'm lost. I need to go back to the yellow because that's my trail. So those would be, just educating people on how to identify the trail is the very most important thing, and that's probably going to be, along with the trail blazes, blazes tend to be, people go where the blazes are. So if we put the blazes where we want the people, they'll go that way. So
How can we prevent trail erosion?
those 4 criteria. I hate to keep going back to these 4 things, but to prevent trail erosion, we need, us as the trail maintainers, or you guys as the trail maintainers, need to make the trail high, dry, durable, and visible. And we can do that by building bog bridges over wet areas. We can do that by putting mulch where we want people to go. We can do that by brushing in, like I discussed for your volunteer day, to brush in areas where we don't want people. So what we would do is take a bunch of sticks and pile them right here on the edge where we don't want the people to walk. So mainly what we would do is, again, make it visible. We just all want to, making it high, dry, durable, and visible kind of makes it a no-brainer for the people. They'll naturally go where we want them to go. So that would be the number 1 way to prevent erosion, is to clearly mark the trail.
Okay. And
Why is trail erosion such a big deal here?
So trail erosion here at Wagon Hill is a big deal because it leads to greater forest degradation. So essentially it leads to the rest of the forest being trampled. So if your trail is eroding and washing away, what happens is that it doesn't look as friendly to people, so people walk somewhere else. And what that causes is more erosion. So erosion, not only here at Wagon Hill, but on the greater scheme of things across all of New Hampshire, across the whole world, and trails alike, is just, erosion is bad. It washes out our trail. It fills in our rivers with sediment, which we talked about earlier, reduces the amount of wildlife that can live in that water because it's dirtier, it's more full of mud and muck. You might see at construction sites, they have those big mats around the construction sites that kind of actually catch all the sediment.
Yes.
And that's to keep all the sediment from washing into our waterways. The biggest example of erosion causing serious environmental degradation is the Chesapeake Bay. We have you can look at the Chesapeake Bay and the water is dark. It's not clear. It used to be clear. 30 feet deep, you could see the bottom of the bay. Now you can't. So, yeah, I guess erosion's bad everywhere. It's not just here at Wagon Hill.
Okay, folks,